The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not a peaceful quiet, but the kind that feels loud, the kind that happens when a room full of happy noise suddenly empties out, leaving a hollow echo behind. I stood alone in the center of the Azure Palace Hotel lobby, a vast, cavernous space of gleaming marble floors and chandeliers that dripped with thousands of tiny crystals. Just an hour ago, this place had been a symphony of rolling suitcases, laughing children, and the cheerful greetings of the staff. Now the only sound was the gentle splash of a fountain in the corner and the frantic, silent thumping of my own heart. My small suitcase stood beside me, a lonely island in an ocean of polished stone. The hopeful smile I'd plastered on my face when they left was starting to feel heavy, like a mask that was cracking at the edges. "You wait here with the bags, honey," my husband Tom had said, giving me a quick, careless peck on the cheek. His grin was wide, a little too wide. "Chloe and I will go park the car. It's a huge garage, might take us a minute, we'll be right back." His mother, Judith, had patted my arm with manicured fingers that felt more like tiny claws. "Don't you move a muscle, dear," she'd cooed, her voice like honey mixed with glass. It was supposed to be a classic family prank. A little welcome to vacation joke they loved to play. They were all in on it. I could see the shared secret amusement sparkling in their eyes as they turned and walked away, leaving me there. But 10 minutes bled into 30. 30 minutes stretched into a full agonizing hour. My initial patience, my practiced ability to find excuses for them times the parking garage must be miles away. Maybe they got lost. Times began to wither and die under the cold. Indifferent gaze of the grandfather clock near the entrance. I watched other families check in, their arms draped around each other, and disappear into the gold-plated elevators, their happy chatter fading as the doors slid shut. My calls to Tom's phone went straight to his cheerful recorded voicemail. A text to my sister-in-law Chloe remained unread, a single grey check mark of dismissal. The knot of anxiety in my stomach, a familiar companion in this family, tightened with every passing second. I could feel the eyes of the hotel staff on me, their polite, professional smiles now tinged with a faint, unbearable pity. I was becoming a fixture, a piece of sad lobby art titled "Woman Abandoned." Just as I was about to crumble under the weight of my own humiliation, a woman in a crisp hotel uniform approached me. Her movements were deliberate, her expression kind but cautious. Her name tag read Diana. "Ma'am, are you all right?" she asked, her voice low and gentle. "You've been standing here for quite some time. Is there anyone I can call for you?" I forced the brittle mask of a smile back onto my face. "Oh, I'm fine, thank you. Really, I'm just waiting for my family, my husband, Tom Sterling. They went to park the car." Diana's professional calm faltered for just a second. A flicker of something, pity, discomfort, maybe even anger on my behalf, crossed her face before she smoothed it away. It was that flicker that told me everything, even before she spoke the words that would shatter the last of my illusions. "Ma'am, the Sterling family, the party that just checked into the penthouse suite." A wave of dizzying relief washed over me, so strong it almost buckled my knees. "Yes, that's them. My husband. Have you seen them? Are they back?" She hesitated, her soft eyes refusing to meet mine. "Ma'am, he and his family took the elevators up to their rooms about 45 minutes ago." She took a small, careful breath before delivering the final blow. He spoke to my colleague at the front desk. "He said they were playing a little game on you. He told us not to worry if you looked distressed." The air rushed out of my lungs in a silent gasp. The lobby, the fountain, Diana's concerned face, it all blurred, the sounds fading into a dull, painful roar in my ears. A game. They had checked into the breathtaking ocean view suites I had poured a small fortune into. They had gone upstairs to unpack, to laugh, to begin the luxurious vacation I had gifted them. And they had left me here not as a joke, not as a prank. They left me as a punchline. I was a forgotten piece of luggage, a story they would tell later, howling with laughter. In that single crushing moment, a decade of quiet insults, of feeling like a perpetual outsider, of desperately trying to buy an affection that was never for sale, all came crashing down around me. The heartbreak was a physical stabbing pain in my chest. But then, as the first tear threatened to fall, something else rose up to meet it. It was cold and sharp and clear. It was the feeling of a spine snapping into place. The feeling of a final straw not just breaking but turning to steel. My trembling stopped. My vision cleared. My hands, which had been clenched at my sides, relaxed. They thought this was a game. Fine. I would finally show them how it was played. Just 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in my sun-drenched kitchen, the warmth of my morning coffee seeping into my hands. My laptop screen was a window to another world, a paradise of pristine white sand and water so impossibly turquoise, it looked like liquid sky. I was buzzing with an excitement so pure and potent, it felt like a tangible thing. My small tech company had just landed a massive contract, the culmination of years of sleepless nights and relentless work. My first thought wasn't about a new car or a bigger house, it was about them. It was about sharing this moment, this success with the family I had married into. A family vacation, I had announced to Tom over dinner that night, sliding my laptop across the table to show him the pictures of the Azure Palace. All of us, my treat for everyone, no expenses spared. Tom's face had lit up with a genuine, uncomplicated joy that I rarely saw anymore. He jumped up and spun me around the kitchen, kissing me soundly. "Julia, you are the most incredible, generous woman in the world," he'd whispered, and for that one perfect moment I believed him. I believed this gesture, this grand act of love, would be the bridge that finally connected me to his family. That belief began to fray when he told them the news. We were at their weekly Sunday dinner held at his mother, Judith's impeccably clean, emotionally sterile house. When Tom announced the trip, a strange quiet fell over the room. It wasn't the happy, stunned silence I had imagined. It was an assessing silence. Judith had been the first to speak, peering at the resort's website on my phone with a pinched expression, as if she were inspecting a questionable piece of fruit. "It's nice, I suppose," she'd said, her voice dripping with a faint backhanded disapproval that was her specialty. "But for what you're paying, dear, I would have expected a place that's a bit more exclusive." I had forced a bright smile, explaining that it was a 5-star resort, one of the best in the region. To prove it, I told them I had booked 5 separate suites, including the magnificent royal penthouse for her, thinking the sheer scale of the gift would finally overwhelm her criticism. It didn't. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were calculating the cost, not appreciating the gesture. Chloe, Tom's sister, was more direct in her own way. She looked away from the phone and let her gaze drift over my new handbag, a birthday present I'd bought for myself. "Must be nice," she'd sighed. A theatrical long-suffering sound to just buy things whole vacations without even looking at the price tag. Her husband Paul just stared at the television in the corner, a silent, willing accomplice to their casual cruelty. Every step of the planning process was paved with these tiny shards of glass. When I sent them the flight details, K.H. Lowe complained that the departure time was too early. When I sent them the spa menu, Judith lamented the lack of a specific, obscure European treatment. Every conversation was a subtle reminder that this was not a shared family experience. This was a transaction. I was the provider and they were the reluctant, critical recipients. My money was something they were entitled to, yet my taste was something they would endlessly question. The worst part was Tom. When I tried to talk to him to explain how their words felt like tiny paper cuts, he would wrap his arms around me and deploy his usual arsenal of excuses. "Oh, you're being too sensitive, honey," he'd say. "You know how Mom is, she's just from a different generation." Or K.H. Lowe's just jealous, she's had a tough year, don't take it personally. His favourite, the one that always ended the conversation, was, "It's just how they are." He said it with a helpless shrug, as if their behaviour was a force of nature, like the weather of something to be endured rather than confronted. He never understood that every time he said it, he was telling me that their comfort was more important than my pain. He was choosing them. He was always quietly choosing them. Even in the car on the way to the airport, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Judith complained about the legroom. K.H. Lowe made a comment about how work money must make long-term parking fees feel like nothing. I just sat in the passenger seat, gripping my purse, clinging to the fragile, desperate hope that once we were there, once the sun was on our faces, and the beautiful resort was surrounding us, everything would change. I thought if I just gave them enough, if the vacation was perfect enough, they would finally see me. Not the bank account, not the successful business owner, but me, Julia, the woman who loved their son, their brother, the woman who just wanted to belong. I had been so foolish. I had been paying for a fantasy. And as the memory of my hope dissolved, leaving me alone in the cold, echoing lobby, I finally saw the truth. Every penny I spent was not a step closer to them, but another brick in the high, invisible wall they had built between us. And they had just left me on the wrong side of it. I retreated from the front desk, the echo of Diana's words following me like a shadow. I found a plush, oversized armchair tucked away in a quiet corner, partially hidden behind a large potted palm. I sank into its velvety depths, my body feeling impossibly heavy, as if gravity had suddenly doubled its hold on me. My purse, usually a simple accessory, felt like a block of lead in my lap. I clutched it tightly, my knuckles white, as if it could somehow anchor me in the swirling chaos of my own thoughts. The initial shock, that sharp, blinding flash of pain, had receded. In its place, a profound and unnerving stillness settled over me. It wasn't peace. It was the eerie calm that follows a devastating storm, a landscape wiped clean, where every truth is laid bare and raw. My mind, no longer frantic with anxiety, became a silent movie screen, playing back a highlight reel of my life with Tom and his family. The scenes flickered one after another, each one a small piece of the puzzle that had just clicked into place. I saw myself at our first Thanksgiving together. I had spent 3 days cooking, determined to impress them, to show them I was worthy. I'd made everything from scratch, my own family's recipes. Judith had pushed the food around her plate with her fork before taking a tiny, delicate bite. "It's interesting, dear," she'd said, her smile never reaching her cold eyes. "Very different from what we're used to." The rest of the family had followed her lead, picking at their food and making a great show of drinking their wine. I had thrown away almost all of it. The next day the screen flickered. It was K.H. Lowe's wedding. As a gift, I had paid for her dream honeymoon 2 weeks in a 5-star hotel on the Amalfi Coast. It was an extravagant, heartfelt gesture. I'd imagined her calling me, bubbling with excitement. Instead, 2 days later, I received a short text message *3x for the trip. Italy is nice. Scene after scene played out. Family dinners where they spoke over me. Their conversations weaving around me as if I were a ghost at the table. Birthday parties where the expensive, thoughtfully chosen gifts I gave were met with lukewarm thanks before being set aside. And the pranks, they were always there, a constant undercurrent of casual malice disguised as humor. The time they accidentally forgot to tell me a dinner party was a formal event, and I'd shown up in jeans to a room full of cocktail dresses and suits. The heat of my embarrassment so intense I could barely breathe. The time they hid my car keys minutes before I had to leave for an important client meeting, laughing hysterically at my growing panic. And through it all there was Tom, my Tom, smiling, oblivious or worse, complicit. When I would later try to tell him how much it hurt, he would wrap his arm around me, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a silencing tactic. "Oh, lighten up, honey," he would murmur into my hair. "It's just a joke. You've got to learn to take a joke." But it wasn't a joke. I saw that now with a blinding, painful clarity. It was a test, a relentless 10-year-long test to see how much I would endure, how much disrespect I would swallow, how much I would pay in both money and dignity for a few scraps of their conditional affection. And tonight, this grand prank in the lobby wasn't the worst thing they had ever done. It was just the loudest. It was the final, undeniable, screaming proof that I was nothing to them but a resource. I wasn't family. I was a function. I was a walking, talking bank account that funded their lifestyle, and they had just reminded me that tools can be put down and forgotten when they are no longer immediately useful. I lifted my head and looked across the lobby at the front desk. Diana was there discreetly organizing pamphlets, but I felt her watchful presence. She was a stranger, yet she had shown me more compassion in a few minutes than my own husband's family had shown me in a decade. She had been a witness, and her quiet understanding sparked something within me. An idea, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, it began to form in my mind. It was an idea so simple and so terrifyingly final that it took my breath away. They were upstairs in their luxurious suites, laughing about the punchline they had left in the lobby. The key cards to those beautiful rooms were in their pockets, but the power to make them work, the power that had paid for the marble floors beneath their feet and the 1,000th thread-count sheets on their beds, that power was sitting right here in this armchair clutched in my trembling hands. My whole body itched with the weight of my sorrow, but my spirit for the first time felt strangely, wonderfully light. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but my resolve was a rod of steel in my back. I smoothed down my dress, took a deep breath, and began to walk towards the front desk. My steps didn't hesitate. They were measured, deliberate, and purposeful. For the first time, I wasn't walking toward them, desperate for their approval. I was walking away, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The walk across the lobby felt like the longest journey of my life. Each soft click of my heels on the polished marble was a deliberate, measured beat, a drum counting down the final seconds of the person I used to be. The opulent surroundings, which I had once seen as the backdrop for a beautiful family memory, now looked cold and alien. The glittering chandeliers seemed to mock me, their light glinting off the tears I refused to shed. I kept my chin high and my gaze fixed on the woman behind the front desk. I was not a victim seeking refuge. I was a client, and I was here to conduct a business transaction. As I approached, Diana looked up from her computer, her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes held a flicker of recognition, of empathy. She had seen my humiliation. She was the sole witness to my lowest moment, and now she would be the agent of my liberation. "Is there something I can help you with, ma'am?" she asked, her voice a model of professional courtesy. "Yes," I said, my own voice surprisingly clear and steady, devoid of the tremor I felt deep in my core. "I have a question about my booking. The reservations for the Sterling family party rooms 100-201, 100-203, 100-205, 1-207, and the penthouse suite 500. I listed each room number from memory. Each one a separate, painful investment in a fantasy that had just dissolved. Diana's fingers tapped quietly on her keyboard. The soft clicking was the only sound between us. Yes, I have them right here, she confirmed, her eyes on the screen. Booked for 7 nights. Could you please confirm the name the primary reservation is under? I asked, needing to hear it said aloud, needing to establish the foundation of my power before I used it. The primary booking is under Julia Sterling, she said, her gaze lifting to meet mine, and the payment method used to secure those rooms. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my hands resting calmly on the cool marble counter. Diana didn't hesitate, she knew what this was about, a Visa credit card ending in 4826. The card is in the name of Julia Sterling. There it was, the simple, undeniable truth of the matter. My name, my card, my money, my power. I took a slow, deep breath, letting it fill me with a cold, clean resolve. This was the point of no return. Thank you for confirming, Diana, I said, my voice low but unwavering. I need you to do something for me. I want you to cancel the reservations for rooms 121, 123, 125, 127, and the Royal Penthouse Suite 1500. I paused, letting the words hang in the silent air, effective immediately. For the first time, Diana's professional mask slipped, her eyebrows shot up for a fraction of a second, a silent testament to the magnitude of my request. She looked from her glowing computer screen back to my face, a silent question in her eyes. I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't cry or rage or justify myself. I simply held her gaze, my expression calm and resolute. I didn't need to tell her the story of my humiliation. She had seen the first and most brutal chapter of it herself. In that shared silent moment, an understanding passed between us. Of course, Mrs. Sterling, she said, her composure clicking back into place. Her use of my formal name felt like a coronation. She was no longer addressing a victim. She was addressing the woman in charge. Her fingers flew across the keyboard again, the quiet clicks now sounding like the tumblers of a great lock falling into place. I can process that for you right now. Is there anything else? Yes, I said, a strange, unfamiliar feeling of lightness spreading through my chest. I would like to book a room for myself, just a standard room. A small one is fine. For one person, for one night. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Diana's lips. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated understanding. I have a lovely quiet room on the 3rd floor with a view of the gardens. Would that be acceptable? That would be perfect, I replied. As she finalized the booking, she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Your larger suitcases were left by the bell stand when your family went up. Shall I have them sent to your new room? The final careless insult. They hadn't even bothered to take my things. Yes, Diana, I said, the gratitude I felt for this stranger almost overwhelming. Thank you, that would be wonderful. In a few quiet clinical keystrokes, a decade of my life was undone. The lavish, expensive dream I had built for them was erased from the system. Diana slid a single, fresh key card across the counter towards me. It was plain white plastic, but it felt as solid and real as a block of gold in my hand. It was the key to a small, simple room. It was the key to my freedom. The click of the door closing behind the bellhop was the loudest, most wonderful sound I had heard all night. It wasn't just the sound of a lock engaging. It was the sound of a world being shut out. My new room, number 314, was simple, almost Spartan compared to the opulent suites I knew were 12 floors above me. There was no sprawling balcony with panoramic ocean views. No bathroom with a tub the size of a small boat, no mini-bar stocked with imported champagne and artisanal chocolates. There was just a bed neatly made with a crisp white duvet, a small functional desk, a single armchair by a window that overlooked the hotel's quiet manicured garden, bathed in the soft glow of pathway lights. It was a room of profound and beautiful simplicity, and as I stood in the center of it, breathing in the clean, still air, the tension that had lived as a permanent knot between my shoulder blades for a decade began to loosen its grip. I was alone, and it was glorious. I walked over to the bed and sat on the edge, running my hand over the smooth, cool fabric of the duvet. I thought of Judith, probably already complaining that the penthouse wasn't as grand as the one she'd seen in a magazine. I pictured Chloe and Paul tearing open their suitcases, arguing over closet space in a room bigger than my first apartment. And Tom, I imagined Tom packing, trying to decide whether to be angry at me or worried about me. His emotions always dictated by what would be most convenient for him. Up there in those rooms I paid for was a world of expectation, judgment and noise. Down here in room 314, there was only silence. My 4 walls, my silence, my choice. I could breathe down to the bottom of my lungs for the first time all day. This small, unassuming room felt more like a home, more like a sanctuary than any space I had ever shared with them. I picked up the room service menu from the desk, not because I was hungry, but because the act of choosing something for myself and myself alone felt like a vital declaration. I scanned the pages of gourmet entrée and fancy desserts. Then my eyes landed on the comfort section. I ordered a grilled cheese sandwich and a soda. It was a meal for a child or for a woman who was finally, after 10 long years, starting to take care of herself. I didn't have to wonder if Judith would find it too common or if Chloe was avoiding carbs this week. It was just for me. When it arrived, I didn't bother with the desk. I sat cross-legged on the bed, placed the tray in front of me and turned on the television to some silly, mindless movie. I took a bite of the sandwich. The warm, gooey cheese and buttery toasted bread was the most satisfying thing I had ever tasted. And then the peace was shattered. My phone, which had been lying silent on the nightstand, lit up and began to buzz violently. It was a black rectangle of venom, a portal back to the world I had just escaped. Tom's picture smiled up at me from the screen. I watched it vibrate, the angry, insistent summons of a man who was used to being answered. I took another bite of my sandwich and let it go to voicemail. A moment later it buzzed again. Chloe, I ignored it, then a minute after that Judith. My thumb hovered over the decline button but I pulled it back. No, declining was an action, ignoring them was a statement. I let her call ring out too. The calls stopped and the texts began. A rapid-fire assault of digital demands. Tom. Clara, this isn't funny anymore, call me. Chloe, where the hell are you? Mom is getting upset. Tom. Seriously, we're all worried sick. Are you okay? Pick up the phone. Tom. Worried. The word was so laughably false it almost choked me. They weren't worried, they were inconvenienced. Their prank had gone off script and they had lost their punchline. They weren't worried about my safety or my feelings. They were annoyed that I wasn't performing my part in their little drama. Finally, one last text from Tom appeared. This one was a masterclass in manipulation, dripping with the false saccharine concern he used whenever he wanted something. Where are you? We're all so worried. We've been looking all over for you. I finished the last bite of my sandwich and took a long, slow sip of my soda. I wiped my hands on the linen napkin. I looked at his message at the lie of his fainted panic. He hadn't been looking for me, he'd been in his suite. I picked up the phone, my heart beating a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. My fingers hovered over the screen. I didn't type out my anger or my pain. I chose my words like weapons, sharp, clean, and aimed directly at the heart of their arrogance. In my room. I suggest you all try your key cards. I pressed send and in the perfect ringing silence of my sanctuary I waited. After I pressed send, I placed my phone face down on the nightstand. The silence in room 314 was absolute, a perfect peaceful vacuum, but in my mind I could hear a symphony of chaos beginning 12 floors above me. I closed my eyes and I didn't need to be there to see it. I knew them. After 10 years, I knew them as well as I knew the back of my own hand. I could picture Tom laughing as he read my text aloud to the others who would be gathered in the grand hallway outside the penthouse suite. She's in her room. He'd announce, a smug, triumphant grin spreading across his face. See, I told you she'd get over it. She's probably been pouting this whole time. Chloe would roll her eyes, impatient and bored. Honestly, she's so dramatic. It was just a joke. Let's just go in and get this over with. I want to change and go to the hotel bar. And Judith, the queen of condescension, would nod in prim agreement. Well, hurry up, Tom. Open the door. Let's go rescue the poor dear. I imagined Tom, feeling victorious, holding the sleek plastic key card to the electronic lock on the double doors of the suite I had so carefully chosen for us. He'd be expecting the satisfying green flash, the soft, welcoming click of the lock disengaging. Instead, in my mind's eye, I saw it vividly. A small, angry red light blinking twice denied. The sound of that failure would be nothing more than a dull thud, but in the quiet hallway it would be as loud as a gunshot. Huh, he would say, frowning, his confidence faltering for the first time. He'd swipe it again, slower this time, as if the machine were merely stupid. Red light denied. You're doing it wrong, you idiot. Chloe would snap, shoving him aside to try her own key card on her own suite door. Red light. Her smugness would instantly curdle into confusion. Paul, her silent husband, would try his red light. The ripple of confusion would turn into a wave of panic. This wasn't part of the game. This was a disruption. This was an obstacle. Their predictable reaction wouldn't be introspection or concern, it would be pure unadulterated fury. They wouldn't wonder what they had done to me. They would be outraged that I had done something to times them asterisk. I opened my eyes. The quiet of my room felt different now. It was no longer a sanctuary for hiding, it was a command center. I had spent a decade shrinking, making myself smaller to fit into the cramped spaces they allowed me. I was done shrinking. I wasn't the one who should be hiding in a small room on the 3rd floor, they were the ones who had done something wrong. I stood up, smoothed down my clothes and walked to the door. My walk to the elevator wasn't a retreat, it was a procession. My heart was calm, my breathing even. When the elevator doors opened onto the vast lobby, I didn't scurry to my corner armchair. I chose a different one with a clear, unobstructed view of the elevator bank and the front desk. I sat down, flagged down a passing waiter, and ordered a pot of chamomile tea. I was not a woman in hiding. I was a woman waiting for the curtain to rise on the final act. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors slid open with a dramatic Times ding asterisk. They stormed out not as a family but as a single furious entity, a herd fueled by entitlement. Tom was in the lead, his face flushed with anger. K.H. Lowe was right behind him, her phone pressed to her ear, probably leaving me another nasty voicemail. Judith's face was a mask of pure indignation. They marched directly to the front desk and slammed their useless key cards down on the marble counter. "Our key cards aren't working," Tom announced, his voice booming through the quiet lobby. "None of them. There must be some mistake with your system." From my vantage point, I watched Diana handle them with the unshakable calm of a seasoned professional. She didn't rise to their bait, she simply looked at them, then at her screen. "There's no mistake, sir," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "I'm sorry, but your reservations were cancelled." "Cancelled?" Judith's voice was a high-pitched shriek that made a nearby couple look up from their conversation. "By whom? We just checked in." "This is utterly ridiculous." I lifted my teacup and took a slow, calming sip as Diana delivered the final devastating line. "They were cancelled by the primary card holder," she stated, her gaze briefly, almost imperceptibly, flicking in my direction. Mrs. Julia Sterling, the name hung in the air like a puff of smoke, foreheads swiveled in unison, their eyes scanning the lobby with frantic energy. Their gazes swept past me once, then snapped back, a collective, disbelieving jolt. And there I was, sitting calmly in a plush armchair, a teacup in my hand, watching them. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I simply sat there, meeting their shocked, furious stares with a quiet, placid strength they had never seen before. The full, crushing weight of what I had done finally landed on them, right there in the magnificent lobby where they had so carelessly left me behind. For a long, silent moment, they just stood there, frozen between the front desk and my armchair, caught in the crossfire of their own disbelief. The entitled fury on their faces slowly morphed into a sputtering, slack-jawed confusion. It was as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language they couldn't comprehend. The Julia they knew, the quiet, accommodating, endlessly patient Julia, would never be capable of such a calculated, definitive act. They were staring at a stranger. Then, as if a single invisible signal had been given, the spell broke. They descended on me, not with the concerned rush of a worried family, but with the righteous indignation of generals whose fortress had been taken in a surprise attack. "Julia, what did you do?" Tom's voice was a harsh explosion in the quiet lobby. He stood over me, his hands planted on his hips, his body language radiating a sense of ownership, of a man demanding an explanation from an unruly possession. "How could you?" Judith's voice, no longer a shriek, had dropped to a low, venomous hiss. "After everything we've done to welcome you into this family, all the years we've put up with you, you are a selfish, ungrateful little girl." The irony of her words, the idea that times had put up with times, me times, was so staggering that a small, humorless smile touched my lips. Chloe stepped forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You ruined our vacation. You ruined it. It was just a joke." "God, why can't you ever just take a joke?" I carefully placed my teacup and saucer on the small table beside my chair. The gentle clink of porcelain on wood was the only sound I made. I looked up not just at Tom but at each of them in turn, meeting their furious eyes with a calm they couldn't penetrate. The fear I had lived with for 10 years, the fear of their disapproval, the desperate, clawing need for their acceptance was gone. It had been burned away in the crucible of my hour-long vigil in this very lobby. All that was left was a profound and final sense of clarity. Slowly I rose to my feet. I wasn't just standing up, I was unfurling. I was reclaiming the space I had allowed them to take from me for a decade, and in that moment, for the very first time, I felt taller than all of them. "You're right, Chloe," I said, my voice calm and even, carrying easily through the suddenly silent lobby. "It was a joke, and after 10 years I finally get the punchline." I looked at Judith. "The joke is that I thought paying for everything would finally make me a part of your family." I turned to Chloe. "The joke is that I spent a decade trying to earn the love of people who only valued my credit card." Finally, I looked at my husband. The biggest joke of all, Tom, was me. Me for believing that my husband, my partner, would ever choose me, that he would ever once stand up for me against the people who so clearly despised me. His face, which had been red with anger, went pale. "Julia, that's not true, isn't it?" I interrupted, my voice still quiet, but now edged with the steel I had just discovered. "You left me here. You stood by and laughed while your family made me feel small and worthless over and over again. This wasn't a prank, Tom. This was the end. This was the moment the lights came on and I saw everything for exactly what it was." I looked at all of them, a pathetic tableau of indignation, stranded in the lobby with their designer luggage and their useless key cards. So the vacation is over, I announced, not just to them but to myself. The person paying the bills has officially checked out. You can't do this, Julia, Tom said, his voice dropping to a desperate, pleading whisper as he finally understood the finality of the situation. I'm your husband, we're a team. No, Tom, I said softly, shaking my head with a sadness that was real but distant. A team doesn't abandon one of its players in the lobby and call it a game. I bent down and picked up my purse and the handle of my small suitcase. As I turned to leave, Tom's desperation turned back to anger. He reached out and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. You're not going anywhere. Before I could even react, 2 large hotel security guards materialized beside us, their presence calm but unyielding. Diana, ever watchful from her post, had made a discreet call. Is there a problem here, ma'am? One of them asked, his gaze fixed pointedly on Tom's hand, gripping my arm. Tom let go of me as if my skin had turned to fire. I gave the guard a small, grateful smile. No problem at all. I was just leaving. And with that, I turned my back on them. I turned my back on 10 years of trying too hard, of accepting too little, of hopping for a love that was never there. I didn't look back to see their shocked faces. I didn't wait to hear their protests or their empty apologies. I walked across the polished marble floor, each step lighter than the last, through the grand glass doors and out into the warm, breezy night air. A town car, which I had ordered while they were stomping around upstairs, was waiting for me at the curb. The driver took my bag and opened the door. As I slid into the cool leather seat and the car pulled away from the glittering, soulless palace, I left them all behind. Standing right where they had left me, abandoned, confused, and finally facing a bill that money couldn't pay. The salty air of the ocean filled my lungs, a scent not of a vacation ruined, but of a life reclaimed. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. My real vacation was just